on the topic Autonomy and the Good Language Learners by Sarah Cottrell. This video is submitted as one of assignments in EFL methodology course given by Professor Nendensri Lungkanawati and Dr. Fajri Nur Yusuf. Basically, this article is the 8th chapter of a book entitled Lesson from Good Language Learners. This book is edited by Carol Griffiths and published by Cambridge University Press in 2008. Autonomy and Good Language Learners is a research-based article by Sarah Cottrell. It explains the role of autonomy as one of learner variable instead of learning variable. So, what will be in this presentation? First, I'll give you the summary of the topic learning autonomy, followed by theories related to learning autonomy, the other research that have been made on learning autonomy, the critical analysis on the issue of learning autonomy, and the last, there will be the conclusion. Let's start with the summary. Since basically this chapter is a research-based article, so the summary covers the objective, the literature, the methodology, the findings and discussion, and the conclusions of the research. This research has two main objectives. The first one is to demonstrate the contribution that the analysis of language learners' stories can make. The second one is to understand the richness and diversity of second language learners' experiences. In this chapter, Sarah Cottrell gives brief overview on the dimension, the definition, the merits of teacher, understanding the concept of autonomy, and also the strategies that teachers can possibly do to activate their students' autonomy in language learning. There are three dimensions in viewing learning autonomy. Those are the psychological, the methodological, and the content. From those three perspectives, we can find the definition of what is meant by learning autonomy. From the psychological perspective, Bernard in 2018 defined autonomy as one of the capacities of detachment, critical reflection, decision-making, and independent action. While from the methodological perspective, since pedagogy has been acknowledged as the method in education, so Holak in 1981 defined learning autonomy as learners' ability to take charge of their own learning. It includes all decision-making regarding the learning they wish to be involved in. While from the content perspective, language learners are not just expected to make decision-making on how and when they learn, but also on what and when they learn. And why do teachers need to know the concept of learning autonomy? It is a crucial variable for language learners to succeed. By knowing the concept of autonomy, teachers are expected to be able to formulate strategies that can enhance the capacity. Now, what are the strategies to activate and to observe the autonomy in learning? First, we need to determine the objectives. Second, we need to decide the content and progression. Third, choosing the method and techniques to be used. Fourth, monitoring the procedure of acquisition. And the last one is evaluating the acquired objectives. The next part of the summary explains the methodology of the research. There are two participants of the research. They are bachelor students from different fields. Both participants learn Spanish by attending the same 12 weeks introductory Spanish course. They were observed and interviewed. The records of the interview were then transcribed and given the participants' approval before analysis. The framework used to analyze the data is the strategies used by the students. The next part of the summary is the findings and discussion. The findings, there are three findings. First, both participants can adopt the strategies without achieving the course goals. Learners involved in institutional language learning may find autonomy constrained by the goals and the practices of the course in which they enrolled. The second findings, the list of good language learners' behaviors need to be operationalized. For example, language practice needs to be linked to meaningful instances of personal languages if learners are to persist with it. And the third finding, what is also needed in addition to a set of good learning behaviors is, as Holek suggests, a learning structure in which control over the learning can be exercised by the learners. Such structure allows individual learners to shape and to define their learning and to define their autonomy. Thus, this may include an individual definition of what constitutes success. Many students are, for example, satisfied with C grades. Well, that's their goal. The last part of the summary is the conclusion. It is concluded that there are two roles that teachers need to do to ensure their students' learning autonomy is activated and that their students can become good learners. The first one, teachers should accept the students' heterogeneity. It covers the diversity in learners' motivation, cultures, beliefs, learning strategies, learning styles, and goals. It also covers learners' differences in age, aptitude, gender, and personality. Those differences affect the learners to respond differently to the task given and apply the learning methods. Second one, teachers have to be aware of the importance of context in language learning, because strategies that work in one educational, cultural, and linguistic context might not work in another. After the summary, now let's move on to related theories. There are some theories that are related to the concept of learning autonomy. The first theory is teachers' beliefs about learning autonomy. The beliefs toward learning autonomy were categorized into technical, psychological, political, and socio-cultural perspectives. Teachers need to map and to organize them, from which they will be able to synthesize the strategy to activate learners' capacity on autonomous learning. The second theory is the autonomy and learner-centeredness. The later dimensions of content adds up the social and political philosophy as the aspect of learning autonomy. From a different point of view, this can also be a sign that learning autonomy has shared some views with the concept of learner-centeredness. The shared views are, for example, it leads to an emphasis on process rather than product. Second, a focus on learners' differences, learner strategies, and learner self-direction. And of course, the last one is the autonomy. It is stated by Richards in 2001. The third theory is autonomy learning to promote higher order thinking skill. As Langkanawati added, that on one side, the Indonesian national curriculum encouraged the learners to learn higher order thinking skills, and on the other side, metacognitives become the highest level of thinking. So, metacognitive strategies involving self-awareness to plan and direct, monitor, evaluate, or correct. Strong indicators of learning autonomy, of course. So, it is believed that in learning metacognitive, the learners need to acquire a certain degree of autonomy, as stated by Mr. in 2005. So, in conclusion, to attain such higher order thinking skill, it is raised the urgency for Indonesian language learners to some extent become autonomous language learners. The fourth theories related to learning autonomy is the shift of teachers' role. If formally autonomous learners have been defined as learners who are actively and creatively involved in the process of planning, conducting, and evaluating the learning process, yet it is important to emphasize not to fall into such a false conclusion that autonomous means learners freely set their objectives and do everything they want to do that they find comfortable with. Autonomous learning should not be defined as the absence of teachers' role. The differences lies in the shift of teachers' role from previously teachers as the source of knowledge into now teachers as the facilitators of learning process. Learning autonomy could be promoted through learners making choices about how they learn and what activities they do, and through involving them in these choices, so not completely teacherless. Benson made it clear that choices and decision making are not the be-all and end-all of pedagogies for learning autonomy, as they are other equally significant factors to attend to, such as considering feedback from students, supporting facilities for the learning process and learning outcomes. While for the fourth theories, its issues and solutions related to learning autonomy. There are some limitations could prevent teachers from developing learner autonomy, include the limited time allotted in their curriculum, students' lack of autonomous learning experience, there are too much focus on examination, and certainly students' limited proficiency in English. In dealing with this constraint, the teacher revealed that they did have access to various resources which could be beneficial in the hands of committed teachers. So the key here is teachers' commitment. The fifth theory is teachers' guidelines and strategies. So besides teachers' attitude toward developing learning autonomy among the learners, in terms of desirability and feasibility are also vitals. It was also found that these workshops contributed to enhancing the teachers' belief about learning autonomy. Tabiati 2014 showed that the autonomy of EFL university learners in reading was influenced by internal factors such as confidence in overcoming reading problems, the motivation to emulate a well-known person, motivation to please parents, and motivation to win in competition among peers, and other external factors such as praise from parents, deadlines set by lecturers, and helping peers. Such strong encouragement from existing rules and regulation, as well as from policymakers and school leaders, is a must for autonomy to be nurtured and developed in daily school life. As studies reported earlier in this chapter have indicated that in Indonesian context, learner autonomy is necessity and has a significant impact on EFL learning. In another book entitled The Practice of ELT, Harmer offered alternatives to expose learners to autonomy learning. The alternatives are: first, giving students an overview of what and how learning is. Second, choosing their strategies to make the learning meaningful to them. Third, making the students taking over their learning that he called immediate creativity. While for the strategies, Benson in 2003 offered 5 general guidelines to achieve autonomy in a classroom. The first one, be actively involved in students' learning. Second, provide options and resources. Third, offer choices and decision-making opportunities. Fourth, support learners, encourage reflections. Those are the teacher's guidelines proposed by Phillips and Benson in 2003. For the strategies of autonomy learning that were presented by Barnard and Lee in 2016, there are some strategies. The first one, encouraging student preparations. Students are more actively involved in teaching and learning if they know what is going to happen in class, and if they have prepared some contribution to it. The second strategy is drawing on out-of-class experience. This allows students to contribute to learning content by bringing in the personally relevant materials. And the third strategy, using authentic materials and real language. Again, this heightens involvement and personal relevance, especially in the students play a part in selecting materials. The fourth strategy is independent inquiry. We should ask students to find out things for themselves rather than teaching them. It is a basic strategy for student involvement. If it can also allow students to pursue their interests. The fifth strategy is involving students in task design. Students can often contribute to the design of tasks by, for example, selecting reading or listening text and writing comprehension questions for each other to answer or discuss. The sixth strategy is encouraging student interaction. This heightens involvement, and the more students talk to each other, the more personally relevant the content of learning. The seventh strategy is peer teaching. Students teach each other aspect of the learning content, which can be an extension of student preparation for class independent inquiry and involvement in task design, of course. The eighth strategy is encouraging divergent student outcomes. Tasks that produce individual outcomes from each student in the class heightens involvement and personal relevance. Divergent outcomes can be a natural consequence of task-based and out-of-class experience and independent inquiry. And students can be encouraged to read or listen to each other's work. The 10th strategy is encouraging reflection. Short reflection session in which students talk or write about what they have learned, what they will do next, or the direction of their learning can play an important role in heightening students' involvement. Those are the strategies. Besides the related theories, there are also some related research. Many pieces of research have been made in the area of learning autonomy. Each of them offers notable contribution to the issue. Some of them are discussed as follows. The first one, Weinstein in her research titled Fostering Learning Autonomy Through the Use of Learning Strategies. She proposed that being autonomous learners means being cognitively active learners. For that, learners need to be strategic and exercise some degree of self-control. The second research made by Victory and Lockhart on their research entitled Enhancing Metacognition in Self-Directed Language Learning. They discussed that to become autonomous learner, we should enhance students' metacognition. It should involve a clinical diagnosis of learners' beliefs about language learning, preferred style, learning needs, and objectives to equip the learners with criteria for choosing optimum strategies, resources, and activities for their individualized programs. The third research made by Chick in his research entitled Digital Gaming and Language Learning Autonomy and Community. He stated that some activities in digital gaming are proven can mediate the autonomy of the language learning process, and it also forms communities. The dimensions of autonomy that are activated through the activities are the location, the formality, the pedagogy, the locus of control, and the trajectory. The fourth research made by Thing entitled Tapping into Students' Digital Literacy and Designing Negotiated Learning to Promote Learner Autonomy. He said that learners' autonomy is developed when they exercise their digital literacy for problem solving during web exploration and data collection for the school learning. So to promote learner autonomy, teachers should connect school learning with students' digital literacy acquired outside school. The fourth Gabar on his thesis paper entitled Utilizing Mobile Assisted Language Learning to Develop Listening Skill and Learner Autonomy. He claimed that the treatment program seems to have an effective impact on improving EFL first-year secondary stage students' listening skill and learner autonomy. The mean score of the experimental group students' scores of the pre- and post administrations of the scale of EFL learning autonomy concerning tablet usage were in favor of post-administration. The sixth research made by Liu, Learner Autonomy, the role of motivation in foreign language learning. He elaborated on the components of autonomy, the sense of responsibility, engagement in learning activities, and perceivability. This study concluded that motivation and autonomy had a high level of positive correlation. Engagement frequency of learning activities had the strongest association with motivation, followed by perceivability responsibility. The next part of this video is the critical analysis. Learner autonomy is claimed to be one significant capacity that leads to learner success in language learning. It is believed that by applying the principle of learning autonomy through their strategies, can elevate students into good language learners. Good language learners are defined by their proficiencies. The proficiencies of the good language learners are bound up not only in what they did individually, but also in the possibilities that various communities offer them, the social practices. To respond to it, teachers race to formulate a set of strategies that involve learner autonomy and implement it to their students. Moreover, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the mode of teaching and learning are shifted from mostly offline into the online. In online learning, interaction and engagement are limited. Since then, it is urgent to prepare students to become autonomous. However, it is still in question whether by implementing autonomy learning simply resulting in good language learners, or is it only good language learners who can implement autonomous learning? In autonomy learning, the learners are expected to determine their own goals, plan and executing their own activities to achieve their own goals, and of course evaluating the success of the process and the result. These capacities are what usually called as metacognition. The keys to success are self-motivation in setting the learning goals, self-interest in choosing the learning material, self-direct to choose learning experiences, and self-evaluation. The issue of this idea is the implementation will only be effective if the learners are equipped with the criteria. Which one comes first? They own the capacity, in this case metacognition, they are supported by ideal environment, and they have enough experience in autonomous learning. Only determining goals need such exercises. It needs high level of critical thinking to formulate a feasible goal. The same goes for the other learning components. If the learners lack in one of those criteria, learning autonomy may bring them into a level of confusion instead of facilitating them to success. Thus, in my opinion, to facilitate language learners into good ones, teachers' commitment is vital. They need to commit not only to implement the principle of autonomy learning, but they also need to previously support their students in activating their metacognition and also award them with rich experiences. Once the two conditions are met, I believe that the learners will be ready to learn autonomously, and the aim of learning is a step ahead. Teachers do not need to be cautious with the critics saying that autonomous learning makes high achievement learners into better ones and low achievement learners into worse ones. Besides teachers' commitment to activate learners' metacognition and provide learning experiences, learners' self-motivation matters most, as stated by Liu in 2015. So, this aspect also needs attention and further research. And finally, as the conclusion of this presentation, in defining the term learning autonomy, it is crucial to choose the comprehensive definition. When autonomy language learning is viewed as a capacity to apply pedagogical step of good language learning, the planning, the conducting, and the following process of learning, it becomes clear that once it is activated, it will be preserved and naturally be demonstrated by the learners in all aspects of their behavior inside and outside school. And to have comprehensive sight, autonomy language learning should be viewed multi-perspectively. There are psychological, methodological, and also the content covers social, culture, and politics. Those perspectives involve learners' diversities such as culture, previous education, their age, beliefs, attitude, gender, etc. Teachers should be aware that these diversities will contribute to the result of teachers' effort in activating the autonomy learning of the learners. The concept of autonomy learning contributes to the shift of language learning methods from the teacher-centered into the learner-centered one. Automatically, it affects the shift of teacher's role that used to be as the source of the knowledge. Now, teachers become the facilitators. However, it needs a highlight that autonomy learning does not mean teachers' absence in the process of learning. Students as decision makers, teachers should facilitate the students with options in all learning components. The goals, option in sources, options in contents, options in activities, and I believe that there are criteria to indicate if the learners are autonomous good language learners. However, since learners' diversities discussed previously, it is problematic to formulate specific steps to activate autonomy in language learning. What can be proposed here is the guidelines and development strategies that teachers should interpret based on their knowledge of their learners. There are at least 5 broad guidelines that teachers who want to foster autonomy in their classrooms can implement. The first one, be active, involved in students' learning. Second one, provide option and resources. The third one, offer choices and decision-making opportunities. The fourth one, support learners. And the last one, encourage reflection. And what language teachers should do is to prepare the students by activating their metacognition and enrich their learning experiences while appreciating the learners' diversities.